Breaking news out of Washington, and this time it isn't coming from the usual critics. For the first time in his presidency, Donald Trump is facing open revolt from inside his own party. Not Democrats, not the media, Republicans. And this isn't gossip, leaks, or backroom whispers. These are senators taking actual votes, drawing constitutional lines, and pushing back against a president who has never tolerated the word no. So what triggered this unprecedented rebellion? Why are GOP lawmakers suddenly willing to defy a man who still commands the loyalty of much of their base? And what happens when war powers, emergency declarations, and institutional stress all collide at once? Stay with me, because what's unfolding right now is not just another political clash. It's a test of whether American power is governed by law or by one man's instincts. Here's what happened. Republican senators joined Democrats to advance a war powers resolution aimed squarely at limiting Trump's authority to launch military action without congressional approval. The vote wasn't symbolic. It was a direct, unmistakable check on presidential power. Trump's reaction? Furious phone calls, profanity-filled threats, and public attacks aimed at his own party. Senator Susan Collins reportedly received one of those calls. The message was simple. Loyalty is demanded. Dissent equals betrayal. But for once, the intimidation didn't work, because Republicans aren't dealing with a normal policy disagreement. They're confronting a deeper crisis, a fundamental question about the limits of presidential power. And here's why this moment is so dangerous. Trump has repeatedly suggested using military force against Greenland. And no, this time, it wasn't a joke. Greenland is Danish territory. Denmark is a NATO ally, and NATO operates on collective defense. Any military threat toward that territory risks triggering Article 5, the same clause that brought Europe to America's side after 9/11. Senator Chris Murphy spelled it out plainly. Any use of force against Greenland is essentially force against a NATO ally, a move that could destabilize the entire Western security architecture. And the fact that U.S. lawmakers must explain this publicly shows how far this situation has drifted from normal foreign policy. Meanwhile, there's another crisis unfolding. Trump has declared a national emergency over Venezuelan oil assets, bypassing Congress to expand executive authority. The administration calls it energy protection. But critics say the timing is suspicious, the benefits unclear, and the winners most likely large multinational corporations, not American families. Layer on top of this the growing frustration over stalled document disclosures. Lawmakers like Senator Sheldon Whitehouse are openly asking why promised transparency hasn't materialized, why Inspector General reviews are delayed, and why statutory deadlines keep slipping. These aren't conspiracy theories, they're institutional alarms. 3 crises are now converging. 1. A Republican-led war powers rebellion. 2. An emergency powers escalation. 3. A transparency breakdown, and Republicans are caught between loyalty to Trump and loyalty to the Constitution. Let's break down the mechanics. The War Powers Act was created to prevent presidents from dragging the U.S. into conflict without congressional approval. And when Trump floated military action involving Greenland, senators didn't hear strategy. They heard warning sirens. Greenland is sovereign Danish territory. It hosts key U.S. military installations, including Thule Air Base, a core part of North American missile defense. Any threat against it would shatter NATO unity, undermine decades of alliance stability, and hand Russia and China an immediate geopolitical opening. NATO's Article 5 has been invoked only once, after 9/11. If the U.S. were now seen threatening an ally, that trust could collapse. But Trump doesn't view geopolitics through alliances. He sees it through deals, leverage, and dominance. And when that mindset extends to military power, even Republicans get nervous. That's why this war powers vote wasn't symbolic. It was a constitutional safety break. And Trump's response, anger, threats, and demands for total loyalty, only proved why that break was needed. Now add the Venezuelan oil emergency. On paper, it sounds strategic. Protect U.S. energy security. But Venezuela's oil system is collapsing. Rebuilding it would take decades. The beneficiaries wouldn't be American families. They'd be massive oil conglomerates. And the timing? Suspicious. This emergency declaration landed right in the middle of congressional scrutiny over Trump's military authority. That raises the obvious question: is this about national security, or about expanding executive power while changing the subject? Because every emergency declaration shifts power away from Congress, and Trump has repeatedly leaned on emergency authority, border funding, trade rules, pandemic responses, and now foreign energy assets. Each time, the bar for what counts as an emergency gets lower. And Republicans are starting to realize that once these powers are normalized, they don't disappear when Trump leaves office. They become tools for presidents they may not support. Overlay all this with the transparency failures. Trump campaigned on releasing long classified documents. But the deadline slipped. Reviews dragged on. Inspector General requests stalled. Senator Whitehouse is raising red flags, not accusations, because when oversight collapses, accountability collapses with it. And every time someone demands answers, Trump escalates another crisis: military threats, emergency declarations, dramatic announcements. It's a strategy he's used for years: overwhelm the system until dissent gets drowned out. But Congress isn't a media audience. It has constitutional power. And some Republicans have finally remembered that. So what are the real-world consequences? American families feel the instability. They see a president discussing military options against NATO territory while inflation and living costs stay high. Small businesses can't plan for the future when foreign policy feels unpredictable. Corporations worry about governance risk. International allies question U.S. reliability. Adversaries see opportunity. Russia amplifies Trump's Greenland threats as proof of U.S. aggression. China watches for fractures in Western unity. Iran sees emergency powers and calculates what Trump might do next. And through all of this, institutional trust erodes. Experts warn that this is a constitutional stress test. Emergency powers expanding, war rhetoric escalating, oversight weakening. And once these precedents are set, future presidents will use them. So what happens next? In the next 90 days, expect increasing Republican resistance on war powers, more oversight demands, and more aggressive rhetoric from Trump as he frames dissent as betrayal. Markets will stay volatile. NATO allies will reassess U.S. stability. And voters will grapple with whether this presidency matches the promises they believed. In 6 to 12 months, the institution either holds or cracks. If Congress maintains its checks, we see a recalibration of presidential power. If not, we may witness the normalization of a presidency operating beyond constitutional limits. And internationally, the damage may already be done. Trust is fragile. Once broken, it takes years to rebuild. Let's be clear, this isn't about partisanship, it's structural. Power unchecked does not correct itself. It must be confronted. Here's what to take away. 1. Republicans are rebelling not out of disloyalty, but out of alarm. 2. Threats toward Greenland are not symbolic. They strike at the heart of NATO. 3. Oversight, transparency, and constitutional limits matter more now than ever. The real question isn't whether Trump wins the news cycle. It's whether the rules that govern American power remain stronger than any individual. And that answer is being written right now, through votes, oversight actions, and the choices Republicans make when loyalty clashes with responsibility. So let me ask you, when institutions are under pressure, do you want spectacle or stability? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. Make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell, because this story isn't over. It's only beginning. And remember, democracy doesn't defend itself. It depends on people willing to stand up when it's risky, uncomfortable, and inconvenient. And right now, that moment is here.